Hello everyone, my name is Naved Anjum and joining me today is a very special guest, Ruchira Gupta, author, activist and professor at New York University. Welcome to this show of the Federal Ruchira. It's wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you, Naved. It's just an honor to be on your show, and I look forward to our conversation about my new book,
Yeah.
I Kick and I Fly. It's a novel, and it's about a 14-year-old girl who is from the Nut community,
Heera.
which Heera, that's right. Her name is Heera. And the Nut community used to be a nomadic group, which was labeled as a criminal tribe under British colonialism.
Right.
And they were so cut off through law
Mhm.
from their land and their livelihood that they ended up squatting on government land or on zamindari land. And in return, they had to provide the most menial chores. So one of them was to be sexually available. And to the point that over decades, there was intergenerational prostitution in this community. So my book, I Kick and I Fly, is set in such a community
Right.
where Heera, who's 14 years old, is about to be sold into the sex trade when the Mela comes to town. It's a traveling cattle fair, and she is going to school because her mother does not want her to be sold. And also, school is the only source of food. But she gets into a fight with the school bully because she steals an egg from the midday meal to take home to her mother, who is starving. And, that leads to her expulsion. And she's sitting and crying. And she's thinking about, what do I do next? Because now, surely, she's going to be sold. And that's when a women's rights advocate finds her and enrolls her in a kung fu program. And then through the practice of kung fu, Heera becomes a champion. She understands the power of her body and learns to fight for it. So, when she wins a gold medal in kung fu, then something begins to change, because then the community thinks, oh, we are worth something. Then, she feels, yes, she can go back to class and nobody will beat her up over there. In the class, of course, the school bully is then scared to beat her. The teacher's proud of her because she's brought a gold medal. Other women in the red light area known as Girls Bazaar, they began to think, yes, our daughters can go to school too. So her courage is contagious.
Right.
And then, I don't want to give away the whole plot of the
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
But eventually,
spoilers.
there's kidnapping, there are complicated family relationships, there are kung fu fights,
Right.
and foreign travel, to the point that Heera also goes to a brothel in Queens. Now, I don't want to tell you anything.
Yeah.
I've written the book as a social justice adventure. So every chapter is a cliffhanger.
Right.
But through the story of Heera, I want to
Hmm.
inspire young people to know that they can stand up to the injustice in their lives and they can win. And Nawad,
Right.
the very important thing is
Hmm.
that Heera is not the only girl who exists in the world.
There are many heroes.
The truth is, there are many Heeras. And the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime says that human trafficking is the second largest crime in the world,
Right.
generating $150 billion for traffickers. You can imagine the scale of it. So, my story is based on true life.
Right. That's
I-
the question I was going to ask you. because,
Yeah.
You have been working as an activist for the last over 20 years now. And how sort of one question that comes to mind, and that's a very basic question and very obvious question, that you could have written as a non-fiction account, but you chose to make it as a fiction. What sort of triggered that decision?
I wanted to get under people's skin. I wanted them to empathize with Heera. And I thought, nonfiction creates a little bit of a distance between the reader and what you read. But in fiction, you can put in thoughts and feelings. Heera is a flesh and blood character. And so that's why I chose fiction as my medium, because I wanted to create that sense of connection. I want people to feel and know Heera.
Right, right. Also, the fact that the novel is translated. It's narrated in the first person. It's Heera who's narrating her story. That also lends its sort of immediacy and urgency to her story in some sense. What was that? What triggered that to make the person make the novel in the first person?
I wanted to give Heera a voice because I wanted the agency of a young adult to be very front and center in the novel. I wanted people to know that young people are capable of changing their own lives. They have thoughts, they have ideas and their opinions. Because normally people patronize young people. And we know that bullying, body shaming, sexual abuse, even poverty and homelessness affects young people. And they have something to say about it, they have something to act on it. And yet we tend to not highlight it. We always try to patronize the young. And I wanted to show, no, here is this brown girl who has voice and who has agency. And she's a fighter.
I think one of the things that strikes you the most about this movie is this sense of hope and optimism. Which normally you have accounts of girls like this trapped in this endless cycle, vicious cycle of poverty, exploitation, and of course this whole thing of them getting sold into prostitution. But you chose to tell a story which sort of is about women, or not just Heera, but many other women like her who are sort of caught in the similar situation,
Yeah.
fighting back. So how was that important to you as an activist and as a writer?
I deliberately shared this story about Heera, who actually triumphs against the sex trade. And the first thing is that it's a hopeful story, it's a triumphant story about somebody we consider downtrodden and marginalized. And I wanted to share with young people and parents and teachers and adults who think that standing up to injustice is not possible. I wanted to tell them that it is possible. That's where the hope is. I also wanted to share with them that courage is contagious, that if one person finds courage, then other people find courage too. And I wrote the story during COVID, at a time when, as you know, people were feeling hopeless and scared and all of that. And I had a true story, which was hopeful and triumphant, because Heera's experience is based on real girls in my NGO, Apne Aap, which works against sex trafficking. I began writing the story when a girl just like Heera, who was from a nomadic tribe, living in a mud hut, about to be sold into prostitution when the Mela came to town, and she won a gold medal in karate. And I thought, this is fantastic. And when she won the gold medal in karate, everything changed, because suddenly the school began to respect her. She began to respect herself. And her community, her family, everybody began to like her more. And she began to do better in school. The bullying stopped. And today she is among the 50 girls that I trained in karate from the red light area. One of them is now a police officer. Another one is a chef. Many are teachers. Some are gas station managers, animation artists, lawyers, doctors, nurses. And of course, one is even, a few of them are karate teachers. So I had a real story which was based on truth and hopeful. So I said, this is the story I can share with the world.
Also, the setting of the novel. I know you're saying that it's all based on the real life experiences and your own experience as an activist. Let's talk a little bit about Forbesganj, where you come from, and where this novel is set in also. And that area, it's also called Lalteen Bazaar, right? It's very interesting, the kind of name it has, and also the kind of change that you have been able to effect in the area. Could you talk a little bit about that as well?
So, Naved, I came from a very normal middle class, upper class family, So I had never seen the inside of a police station, let alone a brothel. I chose to become a journalist, and I was walking in the hills of Nepal when I came across rows of villages with missing girls. And I wanted to know where the girls were. And the question or the answer changed my life, because the men sitting around drinking tea, playing cards in Nepal said, don't you know they all are in Bombay? And Bombay was 1400 kilometers away. So I followed the trail, and I ended up finding tiny girls locked up in tiny rooms for years. And I was shocked, I was devastated, I was sad, I was angry that something like this, a smooth supply chain from villages in Nepal to the brothels of Bombay, existed in my lifetime, my generation, my country, my world. So the first thing I wanted to do was to tell the story. That's what journalists do. So I ended up making a documentary on the subject. While I was filming, a man pulled out a knife at my throat.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the introduction.
Yeah, and he said, I won't let you film here. And, about 22 or so women surrounded me because I thought I'm dead. There were iron bars in the window. He was blocking the exit. And, he realized that it would be too much trouble to kill 23 women. So he slunk away. They saved my life. I finished the documentary and I won an Emmy for outstanding investigative journalism. And when I was on stage in 96, and when I was on stage in New York, I was looking at the bright lights and the applause. And, somehow all I could see were the eyes of the women who had told me their stories. And they had told the man that we will help her to finish the story because we want to save our daughters. So all I could see were the eyes of those women. And in that instance, I decided I will not use my Emmy to build a career in journalism. I will use my Emmy to make a difference. And so I got off the stage, shook hands with everyone, said no to all the job offers, and went back with the award to Bombay, sat on a straw mat with the women on the floor, and asked them, what do you want? And they had 4 dreams. They wanted school for their children, a room of their own where they could sleep peacefully and customers were not walking in day and night, a job in an office, which meant dignity, monthly payments, no violence, old age pension, and punishment of the perpetrators. That became my business plan. I set up an NGO called Apne Aap with them, which means self-action in Hindi. Our 4 dreams of the women became 10 assets. And, we rented a room in an abandoned municipal school, hired a teacher and began to teach the kids. Once the children were ready for school, the principal said, I can't admit them, they're children of quote unquote prostitutes. So I told the women, I said, remember how you rescued me? Now form a Amma Samu, a women's circle, and let's go talk to the principal together. He relented. When the women begged, cajoled, cried together, and they found courage in the fact that they were together to speak up. And, fast forward, we've helped more than 20,000 women exit systems of prostitution across the country. Forbesganj and Calcutta and Bombay and Delhi and all of that. We have also helped all these girls through school and college. I've written about one such girl, but we've helped thousands of girls. And I've told you some of them are chefs and pizza parlor managers and even went to America to study. So it really did happen. And one of the most entrenched places where I worked was in Forbesganj, which is a small agricultural town on the border of Nepal in Bihar. And there is a little dirt street, which is called Altain Bazaar, after Red Light District in English. And that has mud huts on both sides of it, which used to be brothels. And it was right next to what is called the Mela ground. So when the annual Mela would come, these girls would be put through a ceremony where they were sold into prostitution, which was called BC Bailey, married to a banana tree. And I write about that in this book. And then, they were auctioned to the highest bidder. And the man would take her virginity that night. And that was called Nat Utarna. So they have ritualized the whole thing. And, these rituals are very new, not more than 100, 150 years old. Because this community and others like that in India were basically nomads, and they used to be very good at making indigenous medicine from the forest they lived in, dairy products from the goats and cows and sheep they kept till the British banned them. They threw them out of the forest and they said you can't move from one place to another. They outlawed that and they said you cannot sell your products. Because the British wanted to sell made in England products, So Caventer's replaced their dairy products, GlaxoSmithKline replaced their medicines. And they were forced to live as squatters on zamindari land or government land. And had to perform the most menial chores, including being sexually available. And slowly, the men became forced to become pimps and the women prostituted, right? Till it became intergenerational. When India became independent, we got rid of it. But the stigma and the discrimination remained, and the communities are still suffering from intergenerational prostitution, passed down from mother to daughter, and pimping from father to son. So this Laltain Bazaar in Forbesganj is one such place next to the railway tracks and the Mela ground, right? And, the makeshift huts and swampy land, marshy land, and no sense of self or self-esteem or anything. Even the police says, oh, unka kuch nahi ho sakta hai. They are pimps and thieves and all that. So I would say, nahi kuch ho sakta hai, aapne try bhi kiya hai ki nahi. So that's how I jumped in and started working there. And when I began working there with my NGO Apne Aap, there were 72 mud huts which were brothels. And the back room was the bed. Literally, the girl could be born in the front room and prostituted in the back room. And once the mela left, some girls were left behind. Some girls would go in what is known as orchestra parties in the melas, etc. And I said, nahi, main to kuch karungi, aapki idea aapko mubarak. And I started a community center and a community classroom, also in a very simple, dignified place in that Lalten Bazaar, which in my book I call Girls Bazaar. And वहाँ पर हमने काम शुरू किया.
What time was it after the?
We started 2000, yeah, 2000. It took me a few years to get legal registration and all of that. So it took 3-4 years. We began in Bombay and then I went there. I said, I have to go to my hometown in Forbesganj. And I knew about the red light area in Forbesganj, which I'd never visited. But I knew about it through a very famous Hindi writer known as Panishwarnath Renu. And he had written a story which was set in the red light area, which then became a movie with Raj Kapoor and Wahida Rehman called Teesri Kasam, in which Wahida Rehman is a Nautanki dancer. And very much, her name is also Heera Bai. So I named my heroine Heera in memory of that Heera Bai. And, Raj Kapoor and Heera Bai could not get married. Because the orchestra party tells Heera Bai, you belong to us, we own you and you have to go now to the next mela with us. Right. And Raj Kapoor's third vow, Teesri Kasam, is that I will never fall in love with a Nautanki dancer. So my Heera has a different end from that Heera Bai because she becomes a Kung Fu champ and she goes back to school. And in real life, all the Heeras that I helped, they will find love. They are doctors and lawyers and police officers and teachers. So I have changed the end for Heera Bai from Teesri Kasam with the work I did and through the novel I wrote.
Yeah. It's very interesting, Ruchira. And let us talk a little bit about, while we're talking about Forbesganj and you have in big cities like Bombay and Kolkata, where, you have this from Kamatipura to Sonagachi that get talked a lot about. Do you think that over the years have things changed there, or is it something that continues to be? And do these red light areas in the smaller cities and towns get talked about less than these places which have been in the public eye for the many years?
For sure. You're very right, Naved, because what has happened is that in smaller towns and cities, and especially among formerly nomadic groups who were labeled as criminal tribes, nobody notices that there's intergenerational prostitution, though it is common. Even if you go into urban areas, if you actually start finding out who is in the brothels, you will find that they are people from these oppressed, marginalized communities who are formerly nomadic groups, Nuts and Bhedias and Sasis and Kanjars, and there are 16 such tribes, right? But we don't bother to notice it or even survey it or research it, right? And then the other thing is that we say, oh, it's their culture. It's nobody's culture. Culture is what we create and which is dynamic. 150 years ago, it was not their culture. Till Churchill wanted the forests for the world wars or whatever, right? So culture is something we create and we can change. And we tend not to notice it because we are getting cut off from our own understanding of our culture and our roots, that there is something called nomadic tribes. They are called Nuts and Bhedias. What caste are they? What religion are they? We have no idea. हम लोग जब brothels में जाते हैं, we know enough to say कि वो गरीब लोग हैं. That's about it. We don't go deeper and deeper into the layers of oppression to the person I call the last girl. For me, the last girl is someone who's poor, female, and a teenager. On top of that, in India, she is from an oppressed or marginalized caste or community. And in America, she is Black or Native American, but she exists all over the world, including in Europe, where she could be a refugee. So, agar hum last girl ke intersecting inequalities nahi samjhenge, how are we going to challenge it, right? So, that is one thing. But if you're asking that in my place where I began working, where there were 72 brothels in Forbesganj, through the work of Apne Aap, I have actually shut down 70 of the brothels. And the main trafficker, who's described in my book, has life imprisonment and he's gone, he's in jail, And the kids are in school and they have found jobs, etc. And the mothers have taken the mud huts which used to be brothels and turned them into very nice places, painted them and turned them into real homes for themselves. And the back rooms have become small places of business like tea shops and masala making shops. So I have transformed the red light area. It's a huge story, and I, so kept doing the work, and that I took it for granted. But then I realized I have to share stories which are based on hope, which are truthful with the world. So वो हमने किया, and the same thing we did in Bombay. You won't believe it. When I began working in Mumbai, UNAIDS and all these people, the Mumbai AIDS Control Program had done surveys, and there were tens of thousands of prostituted women in those brothels, right? With the help of then Chief Minister Vilasrao Deshmukh, and there was an additional Director General of Police called Mr. Kashyap and an additional Chief Secretary called Mr. Jadhav. And they got together to help me after a horrible incident that I encountered while another documentary called Land of Missing Children in Mumbai. We went into a brothel in Kamatipura and actually pulled out children who were under false floors and false ceilings, and like rats we were pulling them out of a hole and absolutely naked, and we are documenting them and promising them that yes, we'll get you into a proper home, you can have a bath, proper set of clothes, go down to the police van, we are just counting everybody and coming down. By the time I went down, all the girls had disappeared from the vans. And the police said, oh, bhag gaye. And basically the police were in collusion with the traffickers. They'd handed the girls back to the traffickers. So I was shocked, and I was sitting and bawling on the sidewalk that time, crying and all that. And I said, I'm going to get this information to Sonia Gandhi. That time it was a Congress government. I was yelling and shouting. And I had photographs of those girls that they existed. So I did manage to get it to her. She somehow got me connected to Vilasrao Deshmukh without meeting. And the Chief Minister, luckily for me, responded, and he held a meeting in Mantralaya. He called the entire police force. Yes. And together after that, I wrote manuals on human trafficking and saying that you cannot go after the women, you have to arrest the traffickers. Right. And under these laws, you can seal the brothels. So we did that, and over the years, and there was a Dalit cop who was a big ally, Sanjay Apranti, I still remember his name. And we began to seal the brothels and rehabilitate the women and girls, putting the girls in school, women with alternative housing and services and all of that. And today, the red light area of Mumbai has also shrunk. Now there are not thousands of women trapped there, but a few. So those girls in cages which used to exist in Bombay, it's gone, and it's not coming back. And I played a role in that, right? In Calcutta, the Sonagachi, the red light area, was set up under British colonialism. And it was brothels in Bombay, Calcutta, and other parts of the Commonwealth across the world were given licenses, to operate brothels with disease-free women, because they didn't want British soldiers to get syphilis. And उस समय syphilis had broken out among soldiers and clerks. So they said, उनको बचाना है. So they said, okay, we'll give you a license to operate a brothel, but you have to get the women and the girls checked up in the municipal hospital every week, disease-free, license renewed. And there were license numbers given, and all the brothel owners would hang the license numbers outside the brothel under a red light. So they would say, welcome house 61, welcome house 22. And so that's how the word red light district.
One question that, I wanted to ask you specifically was about, this central to this whole thing is women's body. And you write about how Gloria Steinem once said to a girl, I think in Forbesganj, that, your body is your own. And how that sort of also triggered some kind of change in her life and changed her. So if you could talk about a little bit about your association with her, Gloria Steinem, and how sort of in these past over 20 years, that sort of has shaped into your role as an activist.
I met Gloria first after I had started my NGO Apne Aap, and I'd already made the documentary The Selling of Innocence, and we had a small community center in a slum in Delhi, along with community centers in Bihar and Calcutta and Bombay. And Gloria was coming to India, and she emailed me saying that I've heard about your work, and would you have time to meet me? And I was really shocked, because I had, I was like, I thought maybe it's a hoax. Why would Gloria Steinem, who's like the Martin Luther King of the women's movement reaching out to me. My work was very small, but I was excited. And I said, of course, I'll have time to meet you. So when Gloria came, I went to pick her up from where she was staying in a small auto rickshaw, what we call tuk-tuk. And I took her to the slum in Delhi. It was raining, I still remember. And, I couldn't organize a big meeting or a fancy anything for her. So we were standing, there are semi-constructed houses in the slums. So I made Gloria just stand on the CD of one of the slum houses to talk to the women who were standing in the narrow lane, about 20, 25 women, not a big crowd also. And I saw Gloria interact with the women. And one of the things she did was she made an immediate connect with the women, talking about her experience of abortion. When she was trying to escape marriage and come to India, she had stopped in London and had an abortion because she really didn't want to get married at that moment. She wanted to explore the world. And she said how she kept silent about it for a long time. And somehow what she said, I was translating, it connected with the women's reality. And I saw that happen right in front of me. And I was talking to Gloria later on the way home. And she said, yes, you have to honor your sister with the truth. And if you want people to listen to you, you have to listen to them. And if you want people to come to you, you have to go to people. And she said, I saw that in your work, which is I wanted to meet you. And that's how our friendship began. And of course, it became very, very deep because then we started staying in each other's homes. When she came to Delhi, she stayed with me. When I went to New York, I stayed with her, to the point that, I was used to work for the UN. And I was posted in Iran, and there I was diagnosed with cancer. So I had to fly immediately to New York for treatment. It was an advanced stage.
This was which year was this?
2011. And Gloria had already called the head of the cancer department in Sloan Kettering. And literally, I went from the airport. There was a man standing on the curbside waiting to take my reports. This is in New York,
Right, right.
And Sloan Kettering's man, the concierge, was standing on the sidewalk because I'm in a cab. I gave him the report.
Right.
And I go, and there was Gloria waiting for me in her home with the door open saying, welcome home. So we have been through a lot together, and I've seen her humanity and her compassion. And she's very influenced by Gandhian feminism, which resonates with me because the two principles of my own work with Apne Aap are based on ahimsa and antodaya. I think prostitution is violence against women, and antodaya is uplift of the last. To me, it's the last girl. The last girl who's the 13-year-old in a brothel.
We have taken so much of your time. We'll try to wind up with just a few more questions. And then, one thing about this book is also, the way you write it. There's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of conversation. And I was just curious to know how that sort of you map that in your mind. That's, the novel unfolding through a lot of these conversations and dialogues, people, their voices.
So when I wrote this novel, I wrote it as a social justice adventure. That's how I thought of it in my head. It's a new genre, right? Social justice adventure. And Heera is sort of leading the way. She's fighting against homelessness, against poverty, against discrimination done to girls, right? And she's fighting. And I made it a very fast-paced book because I wanted young people to find it interesting. And, so it ends with cliffhangers and fights and, almost like true crime because she's taking on international trafficking syndicates, kidnapping and complicated family relationships and all that. But, when I gave it to my editor in Scholastic, who's also the editor, by the way, of J.K. Rowling, so she told me that, slow it down because you wrote it as fiction because you wanted people to get into the head and the heart of the girl. So slow it down, add texture. So I would sit in New York and shut my eyes and remember the sound and the smell of the place and the dialogues as I remembered them. And I would add in things. So that's why you find it very visual.
Yeah.
And therefore you find the texture of the place very much there because I actually lived through it and experienced it.
Exactly.
Or witnessed it,
Yeah. And also the fact that, you juggle so many roles. You're an artist, you're an actress, an author, and of course you teach at the New York University. And I want, if you could just tell us a little bit about how these multiple roles sort of inform and enrich each other. And we'll wind up.
So basically, for me, I feel that I am a social justice activist. And everything I do is to create a world in which no child is bought or sold. So if I paint, I'm painting hope. I paint my mother's garden because I see something in the monsoon about life, that what is dead is born again, and I can see the lushness. So we don't have to worry. There is no hierarchy in nature. That's why I like painting nature. My animals are bigger than human beings, and my trees are sometimes smaller than the house, and there's no hierarchy, which of course nature does not recognize hierarchy, and everything coexists. The same thing is there in my book. You will see that women are breaking the status quo. They're taking collective action. Communities are coming together and standing up to injustice and exploitation. And it's the same thing through my NGO, Apne Aap. I organize women to stand up to injustice, and all of it begins just like nature, or like a tree from the ground, and grows up and transforms the top. Like, right? So I think
And it's not just limited to women in India, but around the world.
Yeah, my organization is Apne Aap Women Worldwide, because it's all about collaboration and friendship. And for me, the dream of a world in which no child is bought or sold is exactly like nature, where people from every religion, every color, every sex, every hierarchy coexist, and there is no hierarchy actually. And actually, nature shows us that it's possible. So I don't understand why we don't copy nature. And so everything is in the service of the same thing: being an author, being a professor, being a UN advisor, being an artist, all of it.
All right. On that note, thank you so much, Ruchira. It was lovely talking to you. May you continue to. I mean, it's a noble cause that you have taken to heart and sort of working in that direction. May you continue to change many more lives of women. May you continue to effect change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.